Thank you so much for sitting down with us. Appreciate your time.
Good, thanks.
So I want to get started because obviously you're calling the legislature to a special session to take up a constitutional amendment to ban partisan gerrymandering in Wisconsin. What should that look like in our state?
Well, first of all, I believe that we really have to have a basis here. And there isn't anybody in Wisconsin that I know of that thinks that partisan gerrymandering is a good thing. So I think it's really important to start there and make sure that when we do new maps in the near future, after I'm gone, but we have to make sure that that the basis is we can stand for gerrymandered maps. So we have to have fair maps in the state of Wisconsin. So if we get that into the Constitution, then we can start thinking about how we're going to do that, whether it's through the legislation, legislators making that decision, what the maps look like, or a nonpartisan group like they have in Iowa. But frankly, we could probably spend the next 5 years arguing about that. I think once we have something done in the Constitution and make that happen, I think we're going to be in a much better place.
So you think the specifics of the plan could come later?
Yes, absolutely. And it's going to be difficult to get to a point because just from what I can see, there are people that want to have the legislature make that decision. Some people want to have an Iowa type program where they have a nonpartisan group doing it. But because that is going to take a fair amount of time and effort on the legislators' part to kind of figure this out, but we have to have the basis, and the basis is gerrymandering is not a good thing, and we should put it in our Constitution.
And after your announcement on Tuesday, we saw some reaction. I want to read you something that the speaker wrote. He said, "This one-sentence constitutional amendment provides no details as to how this would actually work, but we're supportive of the governor's concept, and we would be more than happy to negotiate with him to develop a plan to be voted on by the entire assembly." Were you surprised to see that level of support from him?
Well, I'm not sure he's not thinking exactly the way I'm thinking on this, but it's good to have something to start with. But if we don't have that piece in the Constitution, we could spend 5 years, 10 years arguing about what the process is. Once that's in there, it's pretty clear. Regardless of who does it and who does the maps, it has a basis of it can't be gerrymandered.
Now, on the other side of the aisle, you told reporters last week through the grapevine you've heard pushback from Democrats, and we saw some responses come out on Tuesday that didn't necessarily give explicit support for this proposal.
Sure.
Do you think that support has changed at all from the Democrat side?
We'll see. I'm going around the state talking about that, and I think people get it, that if we set the bar here on the Constitution piece where it's illegal to have gerrymandered maps, then it's going to be easier to kind of figure out what the pieces are to make that happen.
Do you think you have the support from that side of the aisle?
I think so. I think we'll get something, but we'll see. It's part of the process.
Why call an executive session if you're not sure if you have all the support you need?
So that people can start thinking about it and being part of the solution.
And in the past, we've seen legislators just gavel in and gavel out. What happens if that happens for this?
Well, then we're in a kind of a world of hurt, because we're not going to be, we know that fair maps are important for the state of Wisconsin. People in Wisconsin lived under unfair maps for a decade or more. The idea that somehow we're going to magically feel that this is the process it's going to be and everybody's going to be happy, I think that's a problem. We'll roll into the next part after the next census and not knowing what we're going to do. I would be disappointed if we can't get something done before I leave office, but we're going to give it a good shot.
And I want to move now to the property tax relief negotiations, because that's been ongoing for the past couple of weeks here. It's something you nodded to in your State of the State address. And I want to ask where negotiations stand with Republican leadership right now. Our staff are working with staff members of the leadership every day or every other day. I anticipate that sometime next week we'll get together with the leadership in the Senate and the Assembly and see what we can get done. I think there's some possibility, and in the last budget we were able to get some bipartisan support for
for our work together. So I think it's going to happen, but it's, you know, we're a little bit, you know, we're behind the 8 ball here. But the thing that concerns me is there's no reason why this has to happen next week or the week after. This can happen sometime, you know, a month from now if we want to. So you know, the speaker and others are saying, well, we have to start you know, campaigning in a couple weeks, and we can't come to Madison anymore. Well, I don't believe that. They can walk and chew gum at the same time. So we'll see. But I think we're going to get to a good place.
So you're saying there's no necessarily deadline for this deal?
No, not from my vantage point, certainly not. And, you know, I understand his point, the speaker's point also, but, you know, at the end of the day, they're still getting paid to do the work of the people of Wisconsin, and that includes, you know, in the middle of summer if we need to be.
And now the speaker has said in the past that you're drawing lines in the sand about, are you willing to compromise on general aid?
Well, we'll see. I guess I'm not going to give a specific issue, but I think more money for schools is important. I think it should be not in general aid. I think it should be in a different place, but you know, that's kind of immaterial for most people in the state of Wisconsin. We just need to get schools more money, and we need to make sure that our property taxes are realistic.
So you'd be open to looking at more money for schools in a different way?
Possibly, yeah.
And I want to talk to you about rebate checks. That's something that you had said that you would not support. Right. The speaker, when I spoke with him last week, told me that he wants something that people can feel immediately. Is there another solution here that could meet both of those?
Well, I certainly think when they look at their taxes next winter that they will be better than they were this year. I think they'll be able to see that too. So I'm not sure the check thing is necessarily a good idea. At one point in time, I actually supported that several years ago, but yeah, I've been thinking about that subsequent to that. I think it's important to get the money to schools, and schools, as a result of getting that money, will be able to, you know, mitigate great increases in property taxes. They'll see that next year. So getting a check just before the next election seems kind of weird to me. I think it's kind of buying votes, and I'm not really crazy about that idea.
So fair to say you still don't really support that?
No. Yes.
And I want to ask, is there any scenario here where nothing gets done on these property tax relief deals?
I don't think so. I think the speaker and the leadership in the Senate are willing to compromise. I'm willing to compromise, so I'm hopeful that we're going to get something done.
And I want to ask too, because the Assembly voted just 2-3 weeks ago, so to send a constitutional amendment to voters to limit the governor's partial veto power. It would bar a governor from using their partial veto to create or increase any tax or fee. That's, of course, in response to your 400-year veto. I'm curious what your response is to that.
Well, I'm disappointed but not surprised that this is happening. I used the ability that I had. But the thing there's an overall thing here that bothers me. The legislature can take that to the people and have, without my being involved in it, but they are reluctant to allow people in the state of Wisconsin to have their own constitutional pieces. And there's states all across this country where people can say, we'll get together, put something on the ballot, but they're prevented from doing that here. Only the legislature can do that. I can't do it. The people of Wisconsin can't do it. So if it's good for the goose, it should be good for the gander. And I think people should be asking legislators, if you can do this, why can't we? Why can't we put something on up to the people to vote on around our Constitution? Lots of states do it, and it's a great way to make sure that we're doing the good thing for the people of Wisconsin, because they would take the lead on that.
What happens if voters approve this and governors lose some of that partial veto?
I think that's a mistake, but the people will talk, and they will make that decision, and I'll stand by that. But I also think it's irrational to allow the legislature to do something to put a constitutional thing to vote, but the people themselves cannot. I think that's wrong.
And I want to move now to a big piece of legislation we're seeing. Would you support that online sports betting bill?
We have to make sure that the Native Americans in our state have had some voice in this. They're the ones that are, they're our main process of gambling in the state of Wisconsin. So I'm not really excited about what's coming out of the legislature. They haven't brought the Native Americans into the conversation, and they should.
We saw during the State of the Tribes address the speaker call for the legislature to pass this. You're saying some tribes are left out of this conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, they have been.
And just kind of one last question for you before we wrap up here today. We heard this week that there are some Wisconsin National Guard troops deployed overseas. I'm curious, what have you heard?
We get information every single day, and I can't really talk about that, but it's really important that people know that Wisconsinites are there and they're doing their job as part of the National Guard. But we're aware of it. We get an update almost every single day, or more than every day, several times a day. And I feel proud of the work that they're doing. It's not necessarily safe, but they're representing Wisconsin well.
That's all we have for you this morning, Governor. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks. Appreciate it.